Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed partners, Grupo Terramar is proud to present the next evolution of Monte Palma, Punta Ancla, a prestigious residential enclave redefining the western horizon of the bay. This project transforms the historic isolation of Puerto Anclote into a site of absolute exclusivity. This is more than a neighbourhood. It is an architectural fortress of luxury, anchored by the newly completed Puente del Progreso. This strategic corridor does more than span the water. It serves as a private gateway, ensuring that the wealth of Santa Marina flows directly into this secure, high-yield environment. The promise is clear. We are rebranding the coastline, replacing the past with a premier destination for global capital. This achievement is possible through the unwavering vision of President Rodrigo Castaño, whose leadership in infrastructure has cleared the path for development. We invite you to join us as we move toward our grand completion in 2007, a project that embodies the promise of Monte Palma.
Hello, and welcome back to Monte Palma. For this week's episode, I was planning on building out the downtown core right down here as we fly right by it and look at the bridge, which I'm going to switch out here because I was unsure if I really wanted this bridge. I switched it out. It felt too large, so I just switched it out for more of one of the vanilla bridges. Do it here. Okay, there. And I kept this for most of the episode. I don't like this either. I'm going to switch it back by the end of the episode. But what we're going to be focused on, so yeah, the downtown core seemed like the next logical step. Problem with the downtown core is I have an unemployment rate of 0.2% for downtown core, which is full of office buildings, business and office high-rises. I don't really have a population to support that yet. So I figure we'll jump over across the bay here, the other side, and we'll start filling this in with, this is mostly going to be residential neighborhoods, urban sprawl from the capital with some historic buildings and like historic centers, redevelopments, of course, and impoverished areas. That's kind of the mixture for Monte Palma, is mixing those three major elements together. Also historical sites. And while I'm building this out, at this particular point of the build, I didn't really know what I was going to focus on. So it's kind of like a mixed bag here at the beginning as I kind of just plop things down. to kind of get a feel of what the area might look like. One of the problems was I didn't really have any clear idea what I wanted to build on this particular area. It's very hilly, which makes it far more challenging in City Skylines 2. And so, so it's a bit of a mixed bag here at the beginning, but I obviously tell by the intro there, I do finally settle in onto what I'm actually going to be building. Trying out a few experimental things here. I'm using the leisure pier here, one of the stone leisure piers here, as a key wall, and I'm going to be drawing that out along the entire shoreline here. I think it works really, really well. For the historic component down here by the waterfront, we're going to have a historic town. So you can do this with the leisure piers with anarchy, which is kind of a clever little trick. We have custom assets now for Latin America, the first ones. This one and the first couple here are beautiful assets. These are by De Brum. This one here is the Museum of Independence History. It's located in Brazil. Unfortunately, I can't remember which city it's located in, but stunning asset. I love the detail. And this is going to be the historic focus for this little community down here by the water. Love these statues. If any asset creators are out there listening, if you could include these as like their own individual props that we could place down the city because we have no statues, that would be, an amazing thing to do. I don't know how much more work that is. I don't even know if any asset creators are watching, but if you are, that would be, a wonderful thing to do. But I love the detail on this building. It's such a nice looking building. The second asset, also by De Brum, is up here on the hillside. This is like a first Latin America church, and this is also stunning, like a stunning building. This is the Church of St. Francis of Assisi. I think that the one, once again, it's located in Brazil, and unfortunately I don't remember the exact city it's located in. And here we go, our first zonable assets for Brazil. These are just very simple homes. While I'm filming this, it was only the level 1s were available, but now there's level 2 and level 3 versions as well. These are obviously very, these are done by Modder Other Cakes. I hope to see more. And as you can see, they're very simple buildings, but for what I'm building, these are going to get so much use. These are exactly what I need for so many neighborhoods. So it's wonderful to see them. They're not going to stay here. I'm just putting them down here to kind of show them off. But yeah, I can't wait to figure, find an actual neighborhood to put these in. They come in with props and everything. For another historic component for this area, we have this hill here, and I didn't really know what to do, so I thought, well, maybe it might be a good site for like a rune of some sort. And we're just going to use the castle rune asset here, sink it into the ground, give it a bit of variation. Give it a bit of recolor. And here I'm going to be using the leisure pier as a retaining wall around the structure. This one's nice because it has a bit of a slant to the outer edge of it, well, both edges really. And we're just going to use the move it tool here to level out the bumps and stuff, make it completely flat. And that looks really nice. It does have some nautical elements to it, like the tie-offs and these life preserver stations. I'll have to come in and edit some of that. So yeah, you get this nice kind of like inclined surface to the edge of it. I think this makes a wonderful looking quay wall, just like this. So I'm going to be using more of that. Now, obviously, this little peninsula here is where we're going to be focusing most of our attention. And I wanted some signature building, but I thought maybe I could splice a couple of the vanilla signature buildings here to create something unique. I quickly realized that this is very quickly becoming an outdated kind of way of doing this, at least with the vanilla asset. I think we've kind of moved beyond this and we have better options coming all the time now into the games. This won't stay very long here. It's just trying it out to see how it looks. It never hurts to experiment and try, just try out things to see if they actually will, you can actually create what you need. This one, I decide, yeah, this isn't really going to cut it, but it's going to be here for just a little while until I figure out exactly which building I'm going to use. We're going to be using the leisure pier to draw out our quay wall. One thing to keep in mind with this, it's not the equivalent of pedestrian path, although pedestrians will use it as such. Leisure piers have at the very end of them, they have a gathering point that acts as a park. So keep that in mind. Wherever this leisure pier ends, people are going to want to gather there. So keep that in mind. For the vanilla signature buildings, I am going to be using this one. It's going to be one functional building with a static version pasted into the side of it here, just to make it a little more unique looking. For the rest of the high rises, we're mostly going to be using the assets from the China pack. This one here is from the Eastern European pack. Very nice looking building. And we're going to go with this signature building from the high-rise pack. I think this looks much better. I'm also going to be splicing together two of the Sushi Corp buildings together here to create a custom building here around the waterfront. And a few buildings from the Urban Promenade set here as well. We got to trim off the back sides here. They do have entrances on the back here, so this makes them perfect to line up on a quay wall like this because obviously people can exit the building from the backside. I'm going to hide some underground parking right under this building. Perfect. I think this is a perfect location for it. Going to clean up the edge here. At this point, I'm still trying to figure out exactly the road layout. This access point I have here of all the traffic, I don't like that. That's going to be switched out eventually here. Right up against the water, I don't want a lot of high rises. We have that historic ruin up on the hillside, and there's going to be some attempt there to preserve sightlines, so it's not completely surrounded in by high rises, that you can actually look out and see the bay and see other parts of the city. But there's going to be height restrictions on some of these buildings next to the water here, so it doesn't block sightlines. These underground parking stall lots are found on the mod store. These are great. They can fit in all sorts of locations and they work great for underground parking for these buildings. Since I have such a high concentration of residents here, we're going to add a small elementary school and a small high school, just enough to fulfill some educational demand here. And a small hospital. I'm not sure if this is a hospital or a clinic. I think it's a small hospital. Now that sightline we're not going to see once the downtown is completed, but just give you an idea of what it looks like. I know it looks a little extreme from what I've been building so far. For the capital itself, I'm kind of modeling it. I'm using Panama City as my inspiration. Because we have such a high residential population here, I'm going to include some ferry services. This will shuffle people from here to downtown and across the bay. And at this point of the build, I'm still a little scattered about what I'm actually focusing my attention on. So I'm going to draw out some of the roads and add some buildings around our signature building down here. And figure out how some of these road networks are going to climb up the hillside here. This is going to take me a few episodes to build out this entire area. The building on hills is always a challenge in City Skylines too, and because this area is so hilly, a lot of this is going to take some time. Make sure there's some rooms for plazas around this building. I don't want to crowd it out with other buildings. I want it's the centerpiece, the showpiece here, so we want to just make sure it has some space. We still don't have good custom assets for Latin America for like historic buildings. Spanish colonial would be perfect. Hopefully at some point somebody, some clever modder out there, asset creator will create some for us. But for the moment, we're just going to have to resort to the Mediterranean buildings here, which I think look fine. If I come back in here and recolor them, make them a little brighter and give them different colors, I think they will look a little better. I do have quite a few awkward little spots in here, so where I can, I'm going to fill them in with park assets just to attract people to come down and hang out in these areas. This area down here, because it's directly attached to our historic town, I thought maybe it used to be kind of more of a slum before any of this development happened. But since the development is now filled in this area, it's now being kind of rebuilt as a tourist attraction. I'm going to be using the North America Old Town buildings for this. This is kind of a placeholder for the moment. I have to come back. I don't really get into this episode. I just know the neighborhood I want here. I don't know if how I laid it out here is how I'm going to keep it, but that's just there to give me some ideas. Here I get a little overly ambitious. I want to draw in a one-way pedestrian street here to give access. Get down to here and it really starts to mess up the landscape quite a lot. But I'm getting overly confident. I'm like, I'll just use Move It, and I crashed my game. And I didn't have autosave on, and I think I lost maybe a couple hours of work here. So if things look slightly different, it's because I had to come back in here and rebuild a whole bunch of things. And I'm just switching it out for a regular pedestrian path and something a little less ambitious for the layout. Using some mid-rise residential buildings here just to kind of fill in some of this space. And there's our sightlines. Notice how that nice development is blocking the view of the poorest city in the map so far. Here I'm getting a little distracted by this mod. It's called Platter. This allows you to plop the zones rather than the buildings. I don't know how much use I'm going to get out of this in Monte Palma. I think for Redmont, I think this is going to be very, very useful. The problem on Monte Palma, it's not so much the zoning, it's the lot sizes for the buildings, especially the residential buildings. I can't really get the density I need for some of the neighborhoods. The yards are too large. Also, the yards are full of all sorts of props that just are nonsensical for what I'm building. And I think it turns out to be more work than just placing them by hand, to be honest. Anyway, I'm giving it a try here. I don't really think anything in this neighborhood is permanent for this episode. Just getting some ideas and laying out some things. I am using the Brazilian zone here to just lay out some of these new assets. These are, like I said earlier in the episode, these are going to be great. These are going to be so useful. I just have to figure out a way to draw them out. I think they do require a bit of detailing but you can see here we've got some props popping up with them. Probably come in and tone down some of the colors a bit. Most of them should probably be fairly neutral, the odd one with color. And here we go, some custom tree assets. These are great. Each age of the tree is a different looking tree, so we have all sorts of variety, and no dead tree. The dead tree is just another living tree. Thank God. I hate that dead tree mechanic. I think it's one of the worst things they added to the game. So yeah, just replace the dead tree with another different style of tree. I think that is a perfect solution. Say the downside of using pedestrian paths like this one to create neighborhoods is you won't be able to zone any of the buildings placed along it. So unfortunately, these are just strictly decorative. What I try to do to compensate is if I do have static assets that are on a road that's accessible, I will use one of the zoning cubes to give them a density, like a medium residential density or maybe even high density, just to, even though it's kind of more concentrated, it helps to represent the number of people that should be living in this area. It's a bit of a workaround. It's not perfect. You do what you can. I don't know how much time I spent trying to smooth out this path. No matter what I tried here, it just was not gonna do. It was gonna stay lumpy and bumpy. For when buildings are really cutting into the hillside like this, I just like stacking them to make them appear as if they have a second story. Obviously, they still cut in the hillside, and we're just going to use some trees to kind of cover up some of the oddity here. Once it's all finished, I think it looks really nice. Yeah, we have to always remember that in Monte Palma, a lot of the building here is a bit of an illusion to achieve the look I'm going for. And I finally give up on that pedestrian path here and I'm just going to replace it with some stair assets. These are new. These are also on the mod store. Unfortunately, I can't remember who created these. The problem with stairs is just trying to get them to line up with the underlying landscapes. We need also, again, some bushes and trees, hide some of the jank around them as well. I'm going to cover up the vanilla pedestrian path with a surface here. I don't know if I necessarily like it, although I have used this surface in other locations for the exact same thing. I don't know if I necessarily want it here. I might change this. This whole area over here, this is going to take several episodes to build out. It's a lot of work. If you go back and watch any of the other episodes of Monte Palma, this is always the case. Whenever I start a new area, it always looks a bit odd. But once everything starts to fill in around it and, there's a bit more context for how the neighborhoods relate to one another, I think it all kind of starts to fall into place and it really does start to feel like a unique location. And for this rune, I'm just going to add a few surfaces under it to give it a little more character. I don't have any story for this rune. I built it, but I don't really know what it is. It doesn't seem to be in a good location to be a fort. So I don't know if it's that. I don't even know if it's really that old. If you have any ideas of what the backstory or history is for this place, I'm all ears. This is one of those times where I really don't have a history component to go with this one. But if you have a good idea for this, let me know. I could use some help on this one. going to spend a bit of time just doing a bit of detailing here along the waterfront. This is a very exclusive neighborhood, so it's going to look very, very nice. It's not a particularly old neighborhood. It's maybe just 20 years old, so it's not going to show a lot of age or wear and tear yet. It is obviously part of the city with a tremendous amount of wealth. It's going to be well maintained, and it's going to probably look all new and shiny. I know I could be using the area bucket here to be filling in these. To be honest, I'm still having issues with the area bucket. I can't seem to get it to work very well. It's always kind of hit or miss. Sometimes feels like it's just creating more work than it's solving. Still doing a lot of this stuff by hand. I will play around with it a bit more and see if I'm just not. There must be something about it I don't get. But anyway. I'm using, I'm also trying to create a asymmetric pattern here. I often find like symmetrical patterns where everything is a little too perfect. Visually, it's not that interesting unless sometimes it is. I think a lot of times it's not. It's just not. So trying to create something that's a little off kilter, I think it just looks a little better sometimes. And we're going to be using Gaga XM's grass surfaces here to fill in grassy areas. I think the default map texture looks great at a distance. I don't necessarily think it looks the best for close-up viewing, so Gaga XM surfaces are far better. And of course, even with the new tree types here, so if you sink them into the ground a little bit, you get even more variety of vegetation, which is always nice. Custom assets just keep on coming. We now have a selection of custom boat assets, so all sorts of different types here. This is great, very much needed, just a little more variety. The vanilla boat props are, they're quite large, to be honest. These give us a lot more variety of sizes, smaller sailboats, smaller leisure crafts here, and just more, it just adds more visual interest, which is always a good thing. We also have these floating piers as well. These are a little more finicky to place. You have to hand place the ramp for them. Yeah, we have these floating piers, and I think these look quite nice. I don't use a whole lot of them quite yet. I'm still playing around with these. We also have the supports, the tie-offs here for them. Very nice. We also have a larger yacht. place one of them down here. This is quite a luxurious asset, and here's a couple of the vanilla ones just to give you some context for it. Spent a bit of time filling in some of the awkward areas with a few more plants and some paved surfaces. Behind the schools here, we're just going to put in a little grassy field, like a play area for the students. I'm just going to go around and replace the surfaces in the parks to make sure it all matches. And when you do that, sometimes the new surfaces will overlap other surfaces. So just come in here and clean up. For this little bit, I'm going to do a little bit of an experiment. I'm going to take this speed bump prop here and just trying to recolor it, see if we can maybe utilize it for something else rather than just a speed bump. It's kind of a fun little thing I do, is like finding things within the game and then trying to think of ways that I could maybe change them or alter them to make them into something else. So I'm going to be using the speed bump, and we're going to be drawing it out with the line tool here. And move it just to make sure the ends here don't look too weird. I'm going to recolor them to this kind of gray and white pattern here. And draw in a water surface and turn it into a little reflecting pool. I don't know if this is 100% successful, but like I was saying, it's always fun to experiment and see if you can come up with something unique that you can add to your city using assets that already exist in game. I'm also going to spend some time connecting up the path networks from the parks to the quay wall and filling in some of the areas here with some more trees and shrubs and flowers. these low-rise assets here, I noticed that they have entrances along the backside. So we're just going to add a little pedestrian path here so people can use them. Obviously, these in this type of area, they probably would have been walled in and gated, but for this, I'm not going to bother with that. Sneak in one more apartment high-rise here. For this build, I didn't really include a lot of surface parking. It's because I have quite a lot of underground parking, but there are a few areas where it seems like I could probably sneak in a little bit of it. For the last thing I'm going to be building for this episode is I'm going to be making a custom plaza down here. And how I'm going to go about doing this is the first thing I'm going to be using is one of Sully's grass decals here, and the line tool to lay them out in a grid pattern. Probably the hardest thing here was just to get the grid to line up properly. Off the ones I don't really need. So what this does is now I have this like perfect grid, and I'm going to use it as a template to draw out a tiled surface. And I put it at a bit of an off angle here. Once again, I'm thinking about symmetry. Sometimes symmetry is, if things are too symmetrical, they get boring. So like altering the angle here, making it a bit wonky, that breaks the symmetry. It just makes it a little more visually interesting. Anyway, I'm going to fill in, and I'll use it as a template to guide, to kind of fill in the areas around it. I could leave it as grass, but for this one I'm going to delete out the grass, and now I have these perfect square areas here, and we're just going to fill them in with more tiled surfaces. Fountain to the center, if I can get it to line up. And just finish it off with some trees around the edge. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching to the very end. Watching to the very end is the clearest signal you can send to the YouTube algorithm to show this video to more people. So thank you very much. Next week, we're going to be back in Redmont. I'm looking forward to that. I have a lot of exciting things to show off for that one. Anyway, that's it for this week. I will see you all in the next episode. Bye.